pet store, but not only for pets. I work at a seemingly small pet store in a quite average American town. We sell all a variety of foods for your fluffy friends, toys and animals as well. We also have cryptids. The store isn't much bigger than any other pet store. It looks fun and welcoming from the outside, and the inside looks more like a cozy warehouse. We're located in a desert, but that's all I can tell you. We have a special section dedicated to our pets, and to be honest, I think it takes up most of the space that we have, at least on the top floor. But that's good. Animals have to have a lot of safe space to roam and fly around freely. We've also got shelves packed with colorful, all 100% natural snacks, hay, herbs, meaty foods for dogs and cats, and hundreds of toys in big baskets under the shelves. You could also order anything you need if your companion is on a wilder side. One guy adopts injured coyotes. So as you can tell, we've got everything you'd need and more. There is a secret basement underneath our store that stretches for miles on end. All our employees know about it and are trained to take care of everything that lives there. No one else in town knows about it, except for a few veteran customer residents. Almost all of our basement-level clients are from other states or even countries. We sometimes call it the pit, underneath, or simply the crypt. It's the biggest basement you'd ever seen. Rows of prison-like cells that were customized to safely accommodate their owners seem to go on forever. We have about 250 cryptids, but there are at least 500 more empty cells. And we know all of them and take care of them as we do with all our small friends on the top floor. I can't really tell you why they're here, but I can tell you how they got here and how we manage them. Well, at least some of them cause some things are too secret to even mention them here. It's quite similar to the SCP organization, but our species aren't as dangerous. I'd say we're more laid back than those guys. Important note, we all are trained professionals, and we have strict rules regarding the underneath no one and nothing is in danger. We put our hearts and souls into caring for both the cryptids and animals on the top floor. I think I'll start easy and fun. Why do you think no one has seen Bigfoot since that famous film? Well, he's here. He's been here all along. The clip was captured by one of our owner's grandfather right before he took Bigfoot and got him here. Don't worry, he didn't just take him and forced him to be here. No, Bigfoot came voluntarily. It sounds crazy, but I swear it's true. There were some problems in the woods and the Sasquatch was in direct danger, so they had to intervene. We got him a cozy lair down here, made it look like his natural home, and we make sure his cell is as close to his previous habitat as possible. We provide him with fresh meat every day. We bring him animals to play with. He's a huge, scary-looking guy, but he's very friendly and all that good stuff. Also, I forgot to mention, the cells are different. They kind of act on their own, and they adapt to the residents' need. They're kind of like that magic bag that Hermione had. They seem like normal-sized cells, but once you step in them, you can easily get lost if you wander too far. So, Bigfoot has his own forest in our basement. Shit, we went in there recently and discovered a whole-ass pond right behind the bushes. As far as I know, he's not complaining. The basement also has sections. The wooded section, caves and water pavilions. Sasquatch was obviously in the wooded area, more in the front of the bottom floor, and now we'll go to the water part. It's at the very end of the hallway, and when you turn right and then go all the way to the end, you'll be looking at a big body of water surrounded by willows and various flowery plants. There will be vines hanging down from the branches and a few sandy and grassy islands. This is where the mermaids live. The cell is soundproof, so none of us end up at the bottom of their lake, and we don't really get in there. When we need to go into their cell, we call a special female unit, and they take care of the problem. Mermaids aren't a threat to women. In fact, they love and adore them. Every time we call in the unit, they end up with dozens of flower crowns, pearls, and small hand-crafted gifts from our fish girls. It's really sweet, but knowing what they use to make them is a little off-putting. Right next to the mermaids is where the Rusalkas live. Their cell looks like a meadow that you find somewhere in the middle of the forest with a murky and shallow pond in the center. It's also soundproof. They're more dangerous to us than the mermaids, so we have to be more careful around them. But they usually just sit on the edge of the water, gossip, and brush their hair. They are not exactly cryptids, but they do somehow fall into that category, and we're the only place that could keep them. They don't try to cause trouble. They're dangerous if you don't follow the rules, but they don't try as many tricks as the mermaids do. They get a little more restless in early June, and they are more eager to try to make us go in. If we stare too long, they get angry and sometimes throw things at the door. And it's not anything like flowers. We do have a nice pack of jackalopes somewhere between the wooded and cave sections as well. They eat normal rabbit food, and sometimes we throw them some meat as a treat. They also love dried dandelions. Only dried though. It's the only thing that would make them behave and let us take care of their antlers or any health-related issues. Some of them are very friendly and let us pet them just like normal domestic bunnies. They love it. There are still many that I could tell you about, but I'll keep it for later if you're interested. We do have a few very famous creatures that aren't kept secret from the public, so maybe I'll introduce them at some point. I work at a seemingly normal pet store somewhere in the desert, and we've got anything you need from dog food through beds, and all the way up to Bigfoot. Due to popular demand, I'm coming back with some more stories about the things we keep here. It's good to know that there are other people who care about our precious cryptids just like we do. Also, to avoid misunderstandings, I should mention that some of the cryptids are not exactly straight-up cryptids, but they kind of fall into another categories such as mythical creatures or maybe just creatures from folklore. Nonetheless, they aren't publicly proven to be real, and we use the word cryptid as an umbrella term. Everything that has a legend behind it and is neither human nor animal is a cryptid. So I already told you about our big and friendly Sasquatch, mermaids, rusakas, and jackalopes. I'd say these are one of the easiest to maintain. With all the safety protocols, experience, and knowledge that we have, we don't really worry about getting killed, but getting hurt is definitely a threat. There are things out there that can do a lot to us, and we don't want to risk it. Luckily, they haven't hurt us yet, and I don't think they will. As long as we're not stupid, of course. Some of our cryptids are less friendly though, not particularly mean or evil, although we do also have those, but just distant and grumpy in nature. A cave section, close enough to wooded area to be able to sprout a small forest, far away from potential victims and predators. The infamous chupacabra. There is only one we heard legends about whole population of chupacabras, but they are false and it's here with us. I wasn't here when he came, but I know the story very well. The first sightings reports started creeping in somewhere in early 1995, but we believe that he was around way longer than that. At first, no one was certain if it's something for us, or if it's just a new species of animal, or maybe an animal with unusual eating habits. More and more sightings happened, and it became clear that it's something more than just a canine. The investigation was the #1 priority, as they weren't sure how far will the chupacabra go, and if it will soon start feasting on humans as well. It took quite some time, but they finally caught El Chupacabra on the border of Puerto Rico in 1998. It was a hassle, and transporting him here took way longer than expected. It remained as one of the hardest transport interventions to this day. The descriptions that you find on the internet vary, and they're not too accurate. They get the idea, but always mess something up. The chupacabra is the size of an average goat and the build of a well-kept German shepherd. It does indeed have a single row of spines all the way from its head to the tail, very sharp teeth, and a lizard-like tongue. Imagine a typical set of canine teeth, but longer, sharper, and some are doubled. The overall appearance is confusing. It does look like something, but at the same time it doesn't look like anything. It resembles a dog, sometimes even a kangaroo. From certain angles it looks like a monkey. It doesn't have fur, but it's not just bald skin. Maybe just a thick and extremely short fur. Maybe skin with millions of tiny and blunt spikes. It's not sharp to the touch, but it's also not fluffy. He walks on all fours, but can stand up and use his fronts to catch and hold things. He sort of just jumps like a monkey, but when he runs like a dog. Big claws, 4 fingers. Hind legs look like those that rabbits have, except uglier with claws. Oh, and the tail has a little triangle at the end, for the lack of better example, stereotypical devil tail. Our chupacabra is a pain in the ass. He or it, we never know how to address Chupi, so we just juggle between the two. Doesn't hate being here. He just likes to be nasty. He won't eat us or bite us, but he'll do everything to make our job harder. He's quite a loner and is doing well on his own, but sometimes we let him play with another creature that we have here, and it seems like they get along pretty well. It obviously eats goats, and only goats, so we don't feed him anything else, but luckily one lasts for the whole week. Sometimes even longer when it's bigger and more meaty. All the alleged sightings after 1998 are proved to be false, or the witness saw something that looked similar, a sick coyote perhaps. All the attacks also has been just other animals. There's only one chupacabra. A lot of you asked about Mothman as well, so I decided to mention him briefly. He's not here currently, but he belongs to underneath. We thought about his case for years, and at the end we came to a conclusion that he'll be better off on his own. We wouldn't be able to keep him here, and to be fair, we don't want to. He doesn't harm anyone and anything. He can easily avoid getting caught or even being spotted, so there's no direct danger. We would also have an issue with his cell, as he doesn't really live in a specific location. So we just decided to keep an eye on him from a distance, monitor the sightings and reports coming up on him, and let him be. He's a very understanding creature. He basically has a brain of an adult human and is really smart. He can read and understands us, but he can't really communicate well. He doesn't talk and doesn't write on paper, although he can write a word or two in the sand with his finger. We left a letter for him with a small tracking device attached, hoping he'd understand, and he did. We also left instructions where to find us, and surprisingly he came and let us put it on him. It doesn't affect his life in any way, so don't worry. It lets us know where he is, that's all. We have a whole ass Mothman program going on, and he has his own separate set of files. He's definitely special. Nothing like I've seen before. Recently we got a few reports and calls from Maine, Iowa, and Ontario that sparked some conversations. We thought we'd never get those again. It's dark, but I thought I should share it nonetheless. Years ago we were on a hunt for wendigos in North Minnesota, and it didn't go too well. It killed some folks that wandered too far into the woods, so we had to intervene. Those bastards are known to be very dangerous and hard to get, but it was our duty to respond. We geared up and set off to find them. We knew it might not go according to plan, but we had to try. After a day of searching, we found a cave full of dead bodies, or should I say remains of dead bodies, bones and dried blood. We knew we had the one because of the smell that could belong only to a Wendigo. We got the hell out of there so we wouldn't get caught, and decided to split up into two groups, settle on both sides of an area with a pond, and wait for the creatures to show up. It was the only source of water near the cave, so they indeed showed up. A horrible sight, they're the creepiest looking things out there. I'm sure all of you know how these bastards look like, so I'll skip the description. All I'm gonna say is that all of them have antlers. Anyway, two of them came and they were huge. We waited for a while, but before we got to do anything, they figured out we were there. We did not expect that. The protocol says that in case of being spotted, you must drop everything and save yourself. That's what we did. We ran. We had flamethrowers with us in case they got too close, and we were getting ready to use them. When we heard one of them scream, you will know a Wendigo scream. When you hear one, we knew that this might be our last day on the job. They were chasing us, and they are fast. They caught up pretty quickly, and we knew we had to get rid of them before they get rid of us. We stopped and burned them right then and there. 2 more seconds and I wouldn't be writing this right now. It was the worst hunt I've ever been on. It left some of the troops speechless for days. We didn't want to talk to each other for a while, and all of us got a month-long vacation with the possibility to prolong it. We don't hunt for Wendigos anymore. Luckily, there were only 2, and we didn't get any more calls. Up until now, we still don't know what to do. We could maybe deal with Maine, but 2 more places? No way. We're having meetings, and we're trying to come up with a solution. But for now, going out there is the last thing on the list. Fortunately, no one died yet, so we have our hopes up, but we know we can't just wait for them to start killing. We all know, but no one wants to talk about it. We're aware though, so if any of you live close to those areas, please do not go camping. Do not stay out at night, and do not leave your animals outside. Wendigos will kill you, and there's no way to escape without burning them. Sorry to end on such a sad note, but I thought it would be good to warn you. I have a lot more stories to tell, some recent ones that aren't as grim, so stay tuned. I'm glad so many of you are interested. I told one of the girls from the unit that deals with mermaids to tell them about the love they got, and they were super happy. I think they started collecting pearls for all of you. Sigh. First, a small update on the Wendigos. Some locals found a dead carcass in the river somewhere on the east side of Iowa. They thought it was a decaying deer or other animal, but at the closer look they quickly realized that it was not an animal at all. They obviously knew the legends about Wendigos, and they connected the dots. Special Forces has been alerted, and they confirmed their speculations. We don't know how this one died. There was not a single burn mark on it, but the body is going to be transported to a special location and examined. Hopefully it was the only one out there, and will be down to just Maine and Ontario. Stay safe, folks. I also have better news to share. After years of silence and searching, we finally got a hold of one and only Yeti. It felt like forever since we first heard of him or her, and now we got a chance to see and locate it. Like a large, white, bear-like thing, you know? But like it was standing, but not like a bear, you know? Huge, it was huge. No bear can be this huge, Wright explained in broken English, a guy from India. He was very confused, but tried to describe the thing the best he could. And you saw it where? In the woods. No. Behind a tree outside my house. So just a single tree. Is there a forest? What was it doing? Did someone else see it? Tree outside my house. Just standing there. Like a man. It looked like a bear. But I saw some bears in my life, and they don't do stuff like that. I don't know. I didn't see anyone. I'm not gonna write down the entire conversation. You get the idea. What puzzled me and my friends the most was that the sighting occurred in the middle of the day in a remotely populated area. Was it confused? Scared, maybe? Was it looking for help? We didn't know, and the guy didn't know either. We sent some of our people to investigate, but they didn't find anything. We sent an order to search every forest, every cave, and to make helicopter rounds at least 3 times a day. Nothing. And we had nothing for years. We even set up a base to be there at all times, and we still haven't gotten anything. But recently we got a call from Tibet that claimed to have the snowman, so we immediately went to see what's going on. They really did get a hold of our Yeti. They located a cave that was inhabited by something, so they decided to watch it to see what was living in it. It turned out to be the snowman. We don't know if it was the same one from India, since the locations were not close to each other, but we were too happy to question it. We sent out a team, and they took charge in the investigation. We now have the exact location of Yeti, and we're kinda spying on it. We still don't know if it's a he or she. The name says snowman, but honestly no one ever got close enough to know and like. How do you even check? Just ask? Of course we're doing everything from a distance to not disturb it. What if there's more than one? What if it has kids? So many questions, and even more answers that we're very excited for. I'll keep you updated. Now back to our older residence. It has quite a sappy backstory, but things got better. We have a beautiful church grim that we caught about 5 years ago in an old graveyard west of Yorkshire. For those of you who never heard of such thing, a church grim is a spirit that protects a Christian church and the churchyard. From what you ask? Basically from everything that could cause harm. Back in the day, witches or evil spirits, now stupid people. It usually takes a form of a big black dog. This one was especially big. Poor thing was probably lonely and confused why no one new comes to him. With no other soul in there, he was the only one bound to that place that was long gone. We came across an article from an English newspaper about a teenage boy who got attacked by an aggressive dog with red eyes while exploring an abandoned church and the graveyard. He was literally spray painting some offensive shit on the graves. Luckily, the guy was just lightly scratched, but we all know what was coming for that dog. We thought that it might be a church grim or a black shuck even, and we decided to go and see for ourselves. Normally we wouldn't get involved, but all the red flags were up. We did some asking around and we located the graveyard, showed up at night and waited. At some point we spotted 2 red dots flying around one of the tombstones, and we made a run for it. Sadly, we had to use some force to take the dog because we knew that it's better if we get him rather than the townsfolk get him. We also heard that the graveyard was going to end up relocated or something like that, so we didn't have a choice. He was impossible to catch, and he left us all bleeding, but we finally had him. So now, Church a small tribute to Pet Cemetery Wink Wink lives with us, and he's a very lively and happy pup. It's like he's not a ghost at all. He loves to play fetch, and he's very protective of us. He was timid at first, but he quickly made friends with our hellhounds and other dog-like creatures. He loves hellhounds the most though. We even made an exception to the rule and moved him to their cell recently cause they were happier that way. Speaking of hellhounds, yes, we do have hellhounds. Like actual hellhounds from hell. Don't ask me how we got them because it's a terrible story, but they're here with us and they're very energetic. Some of you asked me about my favorite cryptid, and I said Bigfoot each time. But actually, now that I'm writing this down, I have to say that I also really love Church and the hellhounds. Good boys are my weakness. Also, another quick fun story. Once someone showed up on our doorstep visibly scared. He said he had something for us in his truck. So we go to his truck, and we see something enormous under a blanket. It was Cerberus. A sleeping Cerberus. I'm telling you, man, it ate my dog's food and passed out in the shed. My dog has to take these meds that make him sleep, so I put it in his food and like he ate that. I mean, this ate it. My bongo didn't even get to take a bite, and a whole ass bag of dog food too. My lord, it ate everything. He was sweating like crazy. He probably thought he was losing his mind. I don't know how Cerberus could pass out from such a small dose of sleep medicine, but it did. And it was sleeping like a baby. If I wasn't in this job, I would tell this guy to go check if his brain is where it should be, but somehow it all made sense to me. We took Cerberus in, and after about a week, another guy showed up. He was dressed in a white suit with that tailcoat thingy at the back. He had brown curly hair and a full-grown beard. He was quite nicely tan and honestly really good looking. He had very dark eyes, but there was something unusual about them, like little sparkles flying inside of them. Or maybe it was just the lights in our store. Either way, after a few seconds of me just standing there and staring at him, he finally asked to go somewhere private. I took him to a small room that serves as our office. He introduced himself and explained why he came. Guess what? Hades came to my store to get his 3-headed dog that got lost. You know, like he usually does. I asked my boss to come and help cause I was hella dumbfounded. I seen some things, but that was just plain weird. Last time I checked, Hades didn't wear suits. He definitely didn't speak fluent English, and Cerberus didn't just go missing from the underworld. I had a headache for 2 days after that. It was really Hades though. He showed us some things that only a god could do, and when we let him in the basement, Cerberus recognized him. We signed some papers and they went back home. I haven't encountered anything weirder than that. At least yet. I can tell you that Hades is a really nice guy though. He was polite, well-mannered, and he seemed to care about his pup. He was a little intimidating, but what else can you expect from the ruler of the underworld? Before you ask, I don't know if other Greek, Nordic, or any gods exist, or if they roam the earth. 3 years ago I would say hell no, but now I lean towards they probably do. I haven't seen or met any of them except Hades, but if he was here, why not the others? Personally, I'm not religious, but when a god physically stands in front of me, I won't question it. Did any of you meet a god? I know it's a weird thing to ask, but I'm curious. Anyway, sorry for not posting for such a long time. Summer is hard for us cause we have way more customers upstairs and we also have to deal with way more injuries. Some cryptids are more active during summer, so we go out more as well. I'll try my best though. If you want more, I'll give you more. I already have some news and encounters written down that I thought you might like, and there are a few things happening currently, so I should be back with another post. Stay safe, folks. Be careful around ponds and hide when you hear howling. It's werewolf season. First of all, stop calling us and asking about Slenderman. He's not here, and we know damn well he's not spying on your little cousin either, right? He's contained somewhere else, and it stopped being funny after the 15th prank call. He's a big threat, but luckily he's safe and sound in a place where he can't hurt anyone. Poor guy has to be all alone, but he's intentionally evil, so there's no other choice. Those damn directors think it's fun to make movies about all the creatures, but in reality it only makes our job harder. Weeping, terrified little kids who swear that a big man with very long arms is waiting for them at a playground is not a pleasant thing to listen to at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Slenderman is a way more complex presence than the public thinks he is, due to a certain event that happened in the past involving some kids. We are not allowed to share any dangerous details. So stop asking, stop calling, and please stop scaring children. Now that I got this out of the way, I can finally tell you about the Loch Ness Monster. She prefers to go by Nessie, so we don't use the word monster around her and her friend. I believe everyone knows about her, so I won't go into too much detail. But if you happen to not know Nessie, she's from Scotland, and she was first seen a long time ago. Wikipedia has some info on it, but we can't really confirm if it's true or not. What we can confirm for sure is the first sighting in 1933. The popular photo might be a hoax, but we've got some good ones that are real. She lived in the Loch Ness Lake, but now she's here. She's been here for quite a while now. Caught somewhere around 1999 and after a mass interest sparked and tourists became a real-life danger to her. It's really sad to think about how once people find out about a creature, they lose all common sense and don't think about anything else than getting a photo video. The lake became a popular family vacation destination and a tourist attraction, which made Nessie's home a living nightmare. When it became apparent to our organization that soon we might end up with a dead cryptid, we decided to transport Nessie to our place. Or sorry, my dad and the rest did that. I was too young to decide anything back then, but I was there when she came. I have a habit of saying we anytime I talk about anything. Anyway, they prepared an expedition, closed off the entire area, and got Nessie on board. From what I've seen, they had a huge swimming pool-like container, and they attached it to 3 to 4 airplanes. I know it sounds ridiculous, trust me. We all think it is, but it somehow worked. They safely transported Nessie to our place and accommodated her. Now she lives quite close to the mermaids. Imagine a seal, but with bigger fins and way longer. Obviously a long neck and a tail. The head looks pretty much like a seal, but she has no whiskers and is more dinosaur-like. Or like a snake maybe? She's quite cute though. She likes to play with huge beach balls, tree trunks, floaties. We have to custom order big-sized ones, and eats plants. She's a very nice and friendly cryptid, just like Bigfoot. She can smile and make happy sounds. She sounds like a mixture of otters, dolphins, and seals, but she also makes those deep, long, and typically deep water fish moans when she's having fun. She was all right for all these years, but recently we noticed that she's quite not as happy as she usually is. We changed her diet a little bit, made sure she's not sick and all that stuff, but she was still upset despite everything being like it should be. One day, while cleaning rabbit playpens upstairs, our part-timer lovely girl, she wants to be a veterinarian, mentioned that her grandma's bunny was acting strange and they didn't know what to do. She said to her that maybe it needs a friend, and the grandma decided to adopt another one. Surprisingly, the bunny was just lonely. They need other bunnies in their life to be fully happy, but her grandma didn't know if she could manage 2 animals, and getting him a friend made things better. That made me think about Nessie and the possibility of her just feeling lonely. So we managed to adopt 2 seals and put them into one cell with Nessie. She was really happy. The seals seemed happy as well, so we let them play and decided to keep them together. The next day we found Nessie resting her head on a small island and the 2 seals sleeping next to her. Moments like this outshine all the shit we have to go through in this job. So, do you guys know Bessie, the American cousin of Nessie? We got a call from a cryptozoologist based in Toledo, and she said that she thinks Bessie might be in trouble. According to her, B, that's how we like to call her, somehow got injured by a boat and was seen resting on the beach for a few days. She said that the lake is no longer a good place for her, and she wants us to take Bessie to our basement. Well, we did that. And now Nessie and B are best friends. The world is quite small, huh? Who would have thought? On Monday, we received a letter from Sweden. It was nicely written, using colorful pens and stickers. Apparently, it was sent by a 12-year-old boy from Jokkmokk, and it was sent to a zoo or something. But it was redirected with an English translation to us. I'm not sure why he wanted to send it to a zoo, but I'm glad it came to us. This whole chain of events is pretty weird, to be honest. The boy said that for the past week he noticed small creatures running around his neighborhood. He was curious, so he decided to wait outside and look closer. It turned out to be gnomes. After somehow stopping one and talking to it, yes, he talked to a gnome, he found out about a woman who captured around 50 wild gnomes and was illegally selling them to illegal buyers all around the world. He was very upset and didn't know how to help, so he decided to write the letter. After exchanging some messages with Swedish cryptozoologists, we agreed that they would go there and collect the gnomes and keep them at their place for a while. The zoo probably didn't know about them, and that's why they forwarded the letter to us instead of them. But either way, the gnomes will be saved, and that's important. So now there are 52 wild gnomes somewhere in a cabin in Sweden waiting for adoption or to be released into the wild. We still don't know what to do, but as far as I know, they're talking about their future, and it will soon be resolved. Apparently, it's very hard to discuss anything with those guys. Some of them like to be inside, and some want to be outside, but not in the cold and maybe not in the mountains, but also not here, so it's going to be a rough week. Apparently, some wanted to come live with us, so we're expecting a plane on next Saturday. Never seen a real gnome before, so I'm pretty excited. Speaking of gnomes, are trolls related to them? We're looking into some sightings and we're not sure if they could be related or not. To us, it seems like not really, but some sources hint at a possible relation. If you live in a place where trolls are common, please share what you know. Have they ever hurt anyone? Do they eat people? And if so, do they do it in one bite? Or do they like to, munch on them? Apparently, there aren't that many sources of reliable information on trolls, so we'll be thankful for all the help we can get. And lastly, an unnerving case that could impact anyone in the world, to be honest. Do you know that image of a guy that apparently is some sort of a dream traveler? That many people claim to see him in their dreams. It's something like that, but sinister. We have no idea what caused such an outburst or where did the demon come from, but we're looking into it. My crew, local ghost hunters, by local I mean every team from every country on this planet, demon specialists and even independent hunters, were all onto it. It's killing people in gruesome ways, and it's a high priority for all of us. Some sleep demon cause, how else do I even address it, went on a murder spree, first in rural Russia, then Rome, and now it seems to choose its victims in the States. Although we suspect that it moves all across the globe as we get some deaths in Europe, Asia, Australia, all while the main killings happen here in the US, Canada. We don't know where it's gonna go next. It's a tragic case, and it spreads like an infection. All we managed to determine is that it is not a human, no signs of burglary. It is not an illness, and not a physical creature. We know that it is a demon, and we know that it kills while the victims are asleep. The best way to describe it would be to compare it to Freddy Krueger. It somehow breaks into your dream, turns it into a bad nightmare, and then kills you. Both in your dream and in real life. Some people were found in a pool of blood with no wounds, some were missing limbs, and some were literally turned inside out. We had a guy who was found sitting on his wardrobe and holding his own head in front of him. A lady stabbed with every single utensil she owned. Someone who crawled under the bed with their eyes gouged out and placed on their pillow. Someone with an entire pillow forced down their throat. Guy with missing organs. They later found them hanging from a tree, and that's just some of it. We have a theory that it could have started in a small village in Russia, but we're not sure. Some lunatic took an enormous amount of drugs and a mixture of weird herbal medicine apparently used for magic purposes, and then died in his sleep. Ghost demon hunters say his soul might have turned into a sinister spirit, and now he wants some sort of revenge, but to me it seems too cliché. It did start around the same time though, and they found various books about satanic rituals and magical content, so it could be it, but it's not up to a guess. We need to know for sure, and theories are not enough. The point of me telling you all this is to warn you. Once it gets to you, there's nothing you can do. At least we don't know what you could do, but I have to warn you. The pattern that we observed so far, all victims lived alone, no one younger than 22 years old, and no one older than 50 years old. Majority had no records of any serious health issues, but that might be just a coincidence. No certain body type, no certain hair or eye colors. Religion doesn't seem to be important here either. So pretty much everyone can be a target. I don't know what else to tell you, just pray it won't get to you. Crosses don't seem to work. Maybe holy water? A circle of salt? It won't hurt to try. That's it for now. Sorry for such a long pause and a bad ending, but sometimes shit happens and there's no way around it. I'm gonna be honest, life isn't too good right now for all of us in the store. A lot to think about and a lot to do. Some really sad news came in recently, and we're trying to move forward while keeping the basement running. Story 5. The White Crypt, or an old family horror story. Fair warning, this may not be that spooky by today's horror standards, but every Halloween, my grandpa used to tell this story to us, and it scared the shit out of us. Sadly, he passed away last year, and I decided to enshrine his tale here. My great-great-grandfather worked at a cemetery. This was way back in the Victorian age, so as you can imagine, grave robbers were a somewhat common occurrence. My ancestor was apparently a very fit man in his youth, and so his job was to patrol the cemetery at night, making sure no one broke in and took anything. Anyway, the most important family in the village he worked in were the Whites. The Whites were utterly filthy rich. So rich, in fact, that the townsfolk got suspicious. A lawyer announced that he was going to examine the business records of the family, and the next day he turned up dead. The townspeople were furious. This was the last straw the Whites had given them. So late one night, they broke into the White estate and seized both Emmanuel White, the master of the house, and Gloria White, his wife. They literally tore them limb from limb, and they left the pieces out in the sun for a week. Now things start to get interesting. You see, the White daughter, Emily, was away on a trip for a while, and when she returned to discover her parents' death, she insisted she conduct the funeral by herself. She gathered the pieces and retreated into the manor for 9 days. During this time, all sorts of mysterious things happened. Lightning struck the village church. 3 black cat corpses appeared on the pub's doorstep. A stained glass window of Gabriel in the council building suddenly shattered. The townspeople thought something occult was going on inside, but try as they might, they couldn't break in. After the 9 days had passed, Emily emerged from the manor. She was completely pale and said she'd conceded in her efforts to perform the funeral herself. She gave the bodies to the cemetery to bury in the White family mausoleum. This is where my great-great-grandfather enters the story. He wanted to get on his boss' good side, you see, and volunteered to look after the White Crypt. So he sat outside the only door, from dusk till dawn, or so the job was. 2 hours after his shift started, there was a knock on the inside of the crypt. My ancestor was terrified. The entire time he was there, he heard scratches and moaning coming from within, accompanied by a guttural chanting. Whatever the hell Emily White had done, it was clear that the dead Whites had been revived. But my great-great-grandfather did his duty and did not move till morning. The next night, the banging was louder, but still, my great-great-grandfather didn't move. On the 3rd night, the metal door was bent from the inside. As you can imagine, this terrified my great-great-grandfather too much to bear, and he fled to the pub to try and convince himself it was a hallucination. The next day, his boss said he'd come up with a plan. He was going to wait inside the crypt to see if there was a secret entrance. After all, if a grave robber had somehow broken in, he needed to be stopped. My great-great-grandfather had been a coward, he said, and was therefore ineligible for the job. When he went into the crypt, there were 9 corpses inside, including Emmanuel and Gloria's. The next day, there were only 2. One belonged to the boss. The other was Emily White's. Both had been torn limb from limb. Emily had come in through a secret passageway and had brought some sort of tome into the crypt with her. No one got a chance to look at it. The town vicar burnt it as soon as he saw it and refused to elaborate on it any further. My great-great-grandfather got curious. Where did the passage lead to? So being a foolhardy young lad, he followed it. It led straight to the White Manor. Inside the room, there was a parchment on the wall with the simple instruction: "A White survives forever, by any means necessary." My great-great-grandfather burned the building to the ground and left for Australia. So that's the story. As to whether there was really a White family or not, I don't know. There always was one part of the story that troubled me as a kid, though. My great-great-grandfather burned down the manor, but Grandpa never said a word about what happened to the crypt. Story 6. I took a job as a night guard at a mysterious cemetery. Now I wish I never did. I never thought I'd find myself working as a security guard at a cemetery, but my dwindling bank account and the promise of a decent paycheck led me to Necropolis, a cemetery that I never knew existed. If it weren't for the ad I received while browsing the web, I wouldn't have found it. Clicking on the ad took me to a website that looked like something 13-year-old me would create as my first web page. I quickly skimmed through their page and saw that they have an email I can contact if I was interested in any of their job openings. I sent them an email asking for an interview for their security guard role, and within 5 minutes, I got an email back saying they would like to interview me next week. I continued my life, almost forgetting that I had an interview if it weren't for the phone reminder I set up beforehand. I was thinking of finally having a job that pays well on the drive to the cemetery. I was convinced that I'd spend my nights patrolling empty pathways and snoozing off in my guardhouse, all while getting paid for it. Reaching the cemetery for my interview wasn't much of a hassle. The cemetery was located within a 20-minute drive from the almost devoid house I resided in. It was situated in a forested area of the small town I live in. After parking my car and reaching the front gates, I was met by a tall fellow with a wrinkled and aged face who went by the name of Mr. Damien. He wore an elegant black suit, black pants, black shoes, a black bowler hat, and he held a cane in his left hand. He welcomed me to the cemetery and told me he was the owner of it and that it had been passed down in his family for generations. Even though he said nothing that sounded wrong, he, in a way, felt wrong. I sensed a creepy aura from him. Now I'm not one to judge people, nor do I believe in intelligent life forms that are not human, but he felt off. He walked with a limp, talked slowly with a heavy gasp for air in between words, and was void of expression. It's as if he were an entity attempting to look and behave like a human. Shrugging this off as him being weird, I mean, come on, the dude owns a cemetery. I followed him beyond the entrance gates. All the while he asked me a few questions, all of which were ordinary questions you would expect in a job interview. We reached the end of the cemetery when he asked me the only question that stood out. Do you believe in the afterlife, Mr. Ingram? I was taken aback by this question, but I answered with all honesty. No, I don't, sir. He paused for a moment before nodding and holding out his right hand, which I shook. He showed me around the cemetery. It was guarded by a 7-foot iron fence, and there was only one way to enter or exit the cemetery through the main entrance. In the middle of the cemetery stood 2 buildings, a small, old, and withered chapel, and a much larger and more well-preserved mausoleum. Inside the chapel is what you would expect: an altar, 2 ambos, a few altar crosses, many pews for seating, an organ, and a carpet that ran from the door of the chapel towards the altar seated at the end of the chapel. The chapel itself looked very run down. The inside had gathered a lot of dust, and there were spider webs everywhere. It looked like it hadn't been touched since it was first built. The mausoleum was different. It was very clean, and I could tell that it was very well maintained. It was a large structure, and the inside sheltered many stone sarcophagus. They were lined up in 3 columns, with each column housing a dozen stone caskets. A golden plaque was affixed on top of each of the entombments with the name, date of birth, and date of death of the buried on it. Outside the 2 structures were, as you would expect, graves. Many looked old and withered, and a few looked clean and polished. A stone pathway revolved around a few areas of the cemetery. Finally, I was shown the place I was going to spend the majority of my time, the guardhouse. It was basically a small room with windows overlooking the entrance to the cemetery, the chapel, and the mausoleum. Inside the guardhouse was a chair, a table with a vintage radio on it, a clock on the wall, a jacket coat hanger, and a door that leads to a small bathroom. Mr. Damien told me to enjoy the rest of my day and that I would start my first shift later that night at 10 p.m. I got in my car and drove home to rest a bit before beginning my first shift. On my way back to the cemetery later that day, I was a bit anxious. I wasn't scared, I had no reason to be, but I felt like I wasn't given enough information by Mr. Damien. On top of this, wasn't I supposed to sign any contracts or papers stating I was now an employee of the cemetery? Anyway, I had already accepted the job, and now it was time to earn an easy paycheck, or so I assumed. I reached the cemetery, where I was greeted by the security guard, whose shift had just ended. He gave me the keys to the chapel, the mausoleum, the guardhouse, and the cemetery entrance before wishing me luck. He even insisted that I would need it. I made my way into the guardhouse and found a piece of white paper on the table and a security guard outfit still in its packaging right next to it. I took off the clothes I was wearing and then put on the job outfit I now had. I picked up the note and read it out loud. It stated the following: "Your shift begins at 10 p.m. and ends at 6 a.m. You are to follow the following rules if you wish for your shift to be a successful one. Rule 1: the cemetery closes at 12 a.m. No visitors are allowed to enter after it closes. Once the clock hits 12 a.m., walk around the cemetery and make sure that any visitors already inside the vicinity of the cemetery leave the area immediately. Rule 2: when the clock strikes 1 a.m., a tall, bald male with dark brown eyes and a white goatee will stand right at the entrance gate of the cemetery. You should let this man inside the cemetery without talking to him. His presence will not be felt, so he will not disturb you. Rule 3: between 1:15 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., you may hear an organ start to play from within the chapel, and the lights of the chapel may begin to flicker. Do not worry, you have no reason to be afraid, unless you enter the chapel during this time. Rule 4: you may hear noises from the mausoleum at any time during your shift. Do not approach the mausoleum during this time, no matter what noise you hear or how loud you hear them. They will eventually subside on their own. Rule 5: at 2 a.m., you may hear knocking on the door of the guardhouse. Open the door, and you will either be greeted by a weeping girl or a disfigured male. If the weeping girl was the cause of the knocking, escort her to the mausoleum, unlock the door for her, and make sure to lock the door after she enters the mausoleum. If it is the disfigured male who was the cause of the knocking on the door, close the guardhouse door and lock it the moment you see him. Either turn your head away from all windows or close your eyes and wait until the knocking comes to a full stop. Only then can you resume your shift like nothing happened. Rule 6: if the weeping girl knocks on the door and you hear noises coming from the mausoleum, let the girl into the guardhouse instead and wait until you no longer hear any noises coming from the mausoleum, then refer back to Rule 5. Rule 7: it is mandatory that you leave the guardhouse before 4:20 a.m. You are free to do anything while still abiding by all the above rules during that time. During this time, you will feel like you are being watched. At any moment, you might run into a few people roaming around the grave sites. If this is the case, avoid eye contact and don't interact with them at all costs. You are allowed back into the guardhouse by 4:50 a.m. Rule 8: enter the guardhouse by 5 a.m. At this point, you are not allowed anywhere else outside of the main room of the guardhouse, not even the bathroom. If for whatever reason you cannot enter the guardhouse before 5 a.m., run into the chapel and lock the door behind you. Inside the chapel, search for the bald man and remain close to him at all times. Do not talk to him or touch him in any way. Simply stay within conversing distance of him. They will not harm you if you stay next to him. Rule 9: by 6 a.m., open the gates of the cemetery and wait for the next security guard to take over. Your shift is not over until the next guard arrives or until it's 8 a.m. Do not leave the cemetery until the next guard arrives or it's 8 a.m. Rule 10: if no guard arrives by 8 a.m., you are free to leave, but not before you go into the chapel where you will find the bald man from earlier. Tell him that your shift is over, but no guard has taken over yet. Once he acknowledges that, you are free to leave until your next shift begins. As I settled into the chair, I reread the note again and again. It can't be real, can it? It had to be some sort of prank, either left by the last security guard to take over or by Mr. Damien. Either way, it was odd, to say the least. They will not harm you if you stay next to him. Who are they? Why would there be people inside the cemetery after it closes? I thought about it for a bit before coming to the conclusion that I should follow those rules. After all, they may be testing me, seeing if I am capable of following the rules they give me. I sat in the guardhouse for 2 hours before venturing out into the exterior of the cemetery. I did as the piece of paper said, and I made sure that the cemetery was empty of all life, apart from me. before settling into the guardhouse again. I played around with the radio, and to my surprise, the vintage radio crackled to life, emitting a static hiss that seemed to harmonize with the darkening atmosphere. I quickly turned it off afterward because the sound became too agonizing to listen to. From within the guardhouse, I saw a tall silhouette in the distance, right next to where the main entrance is. It seemed to be a person standing behind the gate, outside the cemetery. I didn't understand why someone would want access to the cemetery at this time, before I remembered the paper I read earlier. I picked up the paper and read it again, making sure to pay attention to every letter written on the paper. Rule 2. When the clock strikes 1 a.m., a tall, bald male with dark brown eyes and a white goatee will stand right at the entrance gate of the cemetery. You should let this man inside the cemetery without talking to him. His presence will not be felt, so he will not disturb you. I got up from my chair and headed out into the open. I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that crept over me, like an invisible presence watching my every move. I made my way down to the entrance, and as I got closer, I could tell that this was the same man the paper was referring to. Tall, bald, white goatee, black clothes, and black gloves. He was taller than I expected, and his clothing made me think he was a gravekeeper. I nodded at the man as I opened the gate and let him in. He had his eyes fixated on the chapel the entire time. After walking into the cemetery, he hastily made his way into the chapel, where I saw him unlock the door and disappear into the darkness inside. To say I was scared was an understatement. My heart was racing, I was sweating profusely, and my brain was begging me to leave, that the job wasn't worth it. I felt like I was the dumb character in every horror movie who does nothing but make bad decisions all day long. Something felt off. He didn't blink. He didn't make a noise. It was like I was standing right next to a ghost. I shook off the feeling of dread. No matter how weird all of this may seem, the job was paying well. The minutes passed slowly, and the air grew thick with tension as I made my way back into the guardhouse, making sure that both the cemetery gates and the guardhouse door were locked. I reread the paper again. I could feel the weight of the rules pressing down on me. It was as if the cemetery held secrets that I was forbidden to uncover. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and the sound of an organ began to echo from within the chapel's walls. I could hear it even inside the guardhouse. Panic surged through me, but I fought to maintain my composure, leaving a mental note to myself to stay far away from the source of the haunting melody. I peeked through the windows to find the flickering lights outside the chapel dancing like ethereal flames, casting an otherworldly glow that seemed to beckon me closer. I stared intensely, sweat forming on my brow as the music intensified, sending ripples of anxiety through my soul. It was as if something magical was transpiring within those walls. Suddenly, the guardhouse door shook under the force of a single knock, causing me to jump. I hesitated for a while before opening the door, dread gnawing at my insides. And there, before me, stood a weeping girl, her face streaked with tears, a sorrow that seemed to pierce my heart. Summoning my courage, I ushered her towards the mausoleum, all the while the organ played a dreamy tune that resonated inside my head. We reached the mausoleum, and I quickly unlocked the door. As I stood by the door, I saw her figure vanish into the darkness of the structure, and I quickly locked the door behind her, my heart pounding. Mentally repeating the rules in my mind, I returned to the guardhouse. The night wore on, each minute passing with agonizing slowness. Shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the hushed whispers of the wind carried a symphony of voices that seemed distant, yet close. I fought to keep my wits about me, making sure to keep the piece of paper with all the rules on it close to me at all times. As the clock approached 4:20 a.m., a shiver ran down my spine. I ventured outside, feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move, observing me as if they were a predator and I were prey, waiting for the right moment to pounce on me. I thought I saw figures move among the gravestones, ethereal and haunting, their forms shifting like apparitions in the mist. Was it my mind playing games on me, or were these apparitions of some sort? I made sure to steer clear of any area where I thought I saw someone or something move. I returned to the guardhouse a minute before 5 a.m., feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I settled into my post, the clock ticking away the final hour of my shift. But the anticipation of what lay ahead gnawed at me, while the feeling of unease made me want to run back to my car and drive home. As the night grew quieter, the seconds stretched into minutes, and I heard the last of the organ. I sat at the guardhouse unmoving, waiting for the time to pass. At last, 6 a.m. arrived and I opened the cemetery gates, awaiting the next security guard to take over. Within 10 minutes, I was driving back home, awaiting my next shift. Necropolis has a dark secret behind it, no one can tell me otherwise. The bald man, the haunting melody, the weeping girl, the moving shadows that I saw, they are real, and I will find out what they all mean in due time. But for now, I rest until my next shift is upon me. The next morning was a blur as I tried to process the events of that first night. It felt like a dream, a bizarre nightmare that left me questioning my sanity. I used all the free time I had to search for clues, details, or any information about Necropolis, but I only found 2 references about them online. The first was a news article written on June 19, 2009. It detailed how Necropolis was once a privately owned cemetery that belonged to the Abaddon family, an immigrant family that came to our town sometime after WW2, but they vanished without a trace on June 13, 1955. Only their youngest daughter was found badly bruised and malnourished right outside the gates of the cemetery. A day later, the cemetery was burned to the ground, and all that remained was buried in a mass grave by the locals for fear of awakening any demons. Many theories arose, ranging from a kidnapping to a supposed cult sacrifice to a suicide-homicide situation. But to this day, the disappearance remains a mystery. Using the information I learned from the first reference, I tracked a user profile on social media with the name of Molly Abaddon. Her profile didn't have any information whatsoever. She had no likes, posts, and was following no one. Her profile banner and icon were the default ones you'd automatically get when creating a profile on this page. However, she was being followed by a single account with the name Molly Brown. That profile had posts, comments, likes, and whatnot. The latest post was a picture of a cute puppy, posted just 2 days ago. Doing more research on public databases, I found out that there is only one person within 300 miles whose last name is Abaddon. At least that is what her last name was before she got married and changed it to Brown. The person I found was a 76-year-old widow. So, it matches up with when the Abaddon family came to this town. Skimming through the profile I found, I pieced together where I thought she lived. Now, yes, I know that is very invasive of me, but I need to know more about Necropolis. And it doesn't require a genius to know that this person is related to the cemetery and its history. I sent Molly a friend request and waited for her to accept or decline it. I eventually dozed off for a few hours before awakening to knocking on my front door. I checked my phone, it was 9:24 p.m. I hadn't ordered anything, so who could be at my door, I wondered. I got up from my bed and walked to the front door. I live in a dangerous neighborhood where stopping at stop signs could get you mugged, kidnapped, or killed, so I was very scared to open the door, and rightfully so. I waited a few moments before the knocking stopped, and a white piece of paper slid underneath my door. I picked up the paper, and on it was written, "Make any further contact with her, and there will be unpleasant repercussions." The words on the paper sent a shiver down my spine. No doubt, whoever had left the message knew about my research into Molly Abaddon and her connection to Necropolis. My mind raced with thoughts of who could have left this warning. Was it Mr. Damien? Was it someone else involved with the mysterious occurrences in the cemetery? The idea that someone was watching me, monitoring my actions, filled me with a deep sense of unease. I stared at the message, my thoughts racing. I knew I needed to be cautious, to tread carefully. Whoever was behind this was clearly intent on keeping secrets hidden, and I had inadvertently stumbled upon something much bigger than I could have imagined. The feeling of being trapped, of being entangled in a web of mystery and danger, closed in around me. I felt as if I were a chess piece trapped in a game. I was weak, and it seemed as if I had no control over what I could and couldn't do. How did they know that I wanted to contact Molly? The more I thought about it, the more questions arose, and the more I regretted accepting the job. Do I take the risk and contact Molly? Or do I abide by their rules like the pawn I am? Do I leave this pathetic town I live in and attempt to escape from it all? Or do I uncover the truth of Necropolis? My mind raced to find a solution, and by the time I thought of an idea, it was already time for my next shift. I decided that whatever the history of Necropolis is, it would be my job to warn others about it and possibly put an end to it. I was already too deep in, so I might as well take this entire place and its history down with me. Eventually, I gathered my courage, and I found myself once again driving through the forest toward Necropolis. The memory of the tall, bald man and the weeping girl haunted my thoughts. The eerie melody of the organ lingered in my mind, and the note I received kept reminding me to tread carefully. I parked my car and stared at the entrance gates, my heart racing. I knew there was no turning back now. I entered the cemetery to find Mr. Damien waiting by the door of the guardhouse. I hesitantly made my way toward him. All the while thoughts of the note occupied mind. The few seconds it took to reach Mr. Damien felt like an eternity, and his presence was just as unsettling as the first time I met him. He greeted me with a nod, his lips curling into a faint smile that never reached his eyes. That was the first time I saw his face display any sort of expression. "Remember the rules, Mr. Ingram," he said, his voice like a whisper that seemed to echo in my mind. "Follow them to the letter, and you will be safe, unlike the guard who relieved you of your first shift." A slight yet mischievous smile started to develop on his face. I nodded, my throat dry as I replied, "Yes, I understand." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing beyond the gates of the cemetery. I watched him go, a feeling of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. I took a deep breath and stepped into the guardhouse, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. My mind repeated his words. "Remember the rules, Mr. Ingram, follow them to the letter, and you will be safe. Unlike the guard who relieved you of your first shift, no doubt that guard got killed, but in what way? I hope to never find out." The guardhouse felt even smaller this time, its walls closing in on me. I changed into the security guard outfit and picked up the piece of paper. The words now etched into my memory. The rules were bizarre, nonsensical even, but I will follow them, no matter what. As the clock struck 10 p.m., I settled into the chair, my eyes fixated on the vintage radio. I hesitated before turning it on, and this time, the crackling static felt like a familiar companion. The eerie sound seemed to fill the guardhouse, mingling with the tension that hung in the air. I tried to distract myself by staring out of the window, my gaze fixed on the chapel in the distance. The memories of the previous night's events flooded my mind, and I shivered despite the warmth of the room. How had I let myself get into this situation? As per Rule 1, I walked out of the guardhouse and into the chilling cold outside, patrolling the gravesites and ensuring that there were no visitors on this side of the gates. I made my way back into the guardhouse once the cemetery was free of outsiders. Minutes turned into hours, and the air grew thick with anticipation. Every creak and rustle seemed magnified, and I found myself jumping at the slightest sound. I glanced at the clock, my heart sank as the hands inched closer to 1 a.m. I got out of the guardhouse when I first saw him again, the bald man. I walked to the gates of the cemetery and let him in. Just like last time, he made no noise, had his eyes transfixed on the chapel, and he didn't seem to acknowledge my presence. I made sure to stay out of his way and not talk to him as he entered the chapel and closed the door behind him. Instead of going back into the guardhouse, I made my way to the mausoleum. The tall structure stood before me, and I felt weak, small, and scared as hell. It felt almost like I was staring up at my creator. I unlocked and opened the door to the mausoleum, and with a heavy gasp, I made my way in. I closed the door behind me before beginning to look around the inside of the mausoleum. I didn't know why I was there, but it felt like the right decision. I was looking for something, but I didn't even know what it was. I read the golden plaques affixed on top of the sarcophagus. They had the names, dates of birth, and dates of death of the bodies entombed within them. I read the last one when I made a realization. And then, as the last stroke of the pen met the paper, he handed me the book, what would later become a guide to my uncertain fate, my path illuminated by his cryptic words. I held the book as if it were a lifeline, my fingers trembling against the pages that now held my destiny. The words written there pulled me in, unraveling the mystery that had gripped Necropolis for so long. The bald man's guidance was stark and direct, a beacon in the enveloping darkness. A shiver ran down my spine as I read, realizing that my defiance had shaken the curse's foundations. The Keeper of Souls, a malevolent entity feasting on fear and suffering, was now vulnerable. The bald man's instructions were clear. 3 objects hidden within Necropolis held the key to ending the curse. A ritual, a confrontation with the Keeper. It was a daunting task laid out before me. And yet, hope glimmered in his written words, a fragile promise that the tormented souls could find their salvation, and I would be set free from this place. The bald man's message warned of the shadows that would conspire against me, and the Keeper's determination to thwart my efforts. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford, and my resolve had to remain unshaken. The key he handed me afterward felt cold in my hand, its weight a reminder of the responsibility I now carried. His final words were etched into my mind, a declaration of my irrevocable connection to the cursed Necropolis. The crypt beckoned, its darkness promising both answers and challenges. Where can I find this crypt? I asked, determination in my voice. The bald man walked over to the sarcophagus furthest away from the door and opened the lid with ease. To my amazement, there was a ladder leading down beneath the mausoleum and into the crypt. Eventually, as if sensing my hesitation, the bald man turned away, his figure disappearing into the outside of the mausoleum. I was left standing there, clutching the book and the key, knowing that I was now bound to a destiny that was intertwined with the very fabric of Necropolis. The bald man's writing etched itself into my mind as I stood before the open sarcophagus, its dark depths beckoning me. The weight of the book and the key in my hands felt both comforting and ominous. I knew that there was no turning back now. I had chosen to face the darkness head-on, to challenge the Keeper of Souls and break the curse that had plagued Necropolis for so long. With a determined breath, I took a step forward and descended the ladder into the crypt. After a long descent, I was greeted by a metal door with enchanting carvings carved on it. I used the key to open the gate. Beyond the gate, the air was damp and musty, the walls lined with ancient stone shelves holding ornate coffins. Dim torchlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The crypt seemed like a place forgotten by time, a hidden sanctuary of secrets and whispers. I followed the path, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the chamber. The crypt was vast, and I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me. The journey was a mix of anticipation and unease, but I knew that each step I took brought me closer to the first of the 3 objects I needed to break the curse. Eventually, I reached the heart of the crypt, a circular chamber with a pedestal at its center. The pedestal held an object that seemed out of place amidst the gloomy surroundings, a polished silver amulet, intricately engraved with symbols and patterns. Its soft glow seemed to ward off the darkness, offering a glimmer of hope. I approached the amulet with cautious reverence, the book's words echoing in my mind. This was the first object I needed. As I picked up the amulet, a surge of energy coursed through me, as if the amulet's power resonated with mine. I felt a connection to something ancient and powerful, a connection that would aid me on my quest to confront the Keeper of Souls. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the challenges that awaited me were undoubtedly formidable. But I had taken the first step, and I held the key to unlocking the curse's grip on Necropolis. As I held the amulet in my hand, a sense of purpose filled my heart. The weeping girl, the tormented souls, this was their chance for salvation, and I was determined to be their beacon of hope. With the amulet in my possession, and both the key and the book now at my side, I turned to leave the crypt and ascend the ladder back to the mausoleum above. The journey was far from over, and the Keeper of Souls would not relinquish its hold easily. But I was no longer alone in this battle. I carried the strength of the souls that longed for release, the guidance of the bald man, and the determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As I emerged from the crypt, the mausoleum's quiet ambience greeted me once more. The book, the key to the crypt, and the amulet were now my companions, tangible reminders of the path I had chosen. Outside, the sunlight cast long shadows as the world continued its daily rhythm, unaware of the hidden struggles within Necropolis. I knew that the battle against the curse had just begun, and that the shadows would conspire, the keeper would resist, and danger would lurk around every corner. But I was prepared to face whatever darkness awaited me. The crypt was only the beginning, a symbol of the journey that would lead me deeper into the heart of Necropolis, towards a confrontation that would determine the fate of the trapped souls and my own. With renewed determination, I emerged from the mausoleum and once again found myself walking toward the chapel. The amulet in my possession pulsed with an otherworldly energy, guiding me toward the second object that would aid me in my quest. The book's instructions were clear. Hidden within the old chapel, guarded by a puzzle only the chosen could solve, was the key to unlocking the keeper's lair. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I had come too far to turn back now. As I walked through the labyrinthine paths of Necropolis, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to dance at the edges of my vision, and whispers brushed against my ears like a chilling wind. The bald man's words echoed in my mind. Shadows would conspire against me. I tightened my grip on the amulet and pressed forward, determined to unravel the mysteries of this cursed place. Finally, I stood before the ancient chapel, its daunting facade weathered by time. The open doorway loomed before me. I took a deep breath and walked in. The amulet's energy seemed to resonate with the chapel, assuring me that I was on the right path. Stepping into the chapel, the air heavy with the weight of history, I saw torches lining the walls, casting a warm glow that danced across the ancient interior. At the back end of the room stood an altar, upon which rested a tarnished silver mirror. Its surface was clouded, as if holding secrets within its depths. The mirror was framed by engravings, each telling a story of its own. With the book in one hand and the amulet in the other, I approached the mirror. As I gazed into its surface, my reflection wavered, and another scene began to unfold. A spectral figure, shrouded in ethereal light, appeared before me. The figure raised its hand, pointing towards the amulet in my hand. Suddenly, the amulet began to pulsate, emitting a dark red glow that beckoned me to wear it. Hesitantly, I placed the amulet around my neck. It then emitted a bright green glow, resonating with my energy. It made me feel rejuvenated, bestowing upon me a surge of energy, unlike any I had felt before. The figure inside the mirror then pointed towards the wall right behind me. I walked over to the wooden wall, studying the engravings enchanted upon it. Suddenly, an area of the wall opened up, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside the compartment was a small, ornate box. Within this box, I found a key and a photo. Examining the photo more closely, I discovered a black and white portrait of a young woman whose facial features bore an uncanny resemblance to Malia Baden. My heart raced as I made a realization. The woman in the picture, Malia Baden, and the weeping girl bore a striking resemblance. It was undeniable. A chill ran down my spine as I grasped the significance of this discovery. Could Malia Baden be actively connected to the curse plaguing Necropolis? Could the weeping girl be a past version of her? This was either a theory or a revelation, yet either way, I felt a new layer of complexity added to my mission. Beside the photograph, the key rested in the ornate box, seemingly waiting for its purpose to be fulfilled. The book's guidance echoed in my mind, urging me to continue on this path, to unlock the secrets hidden deep within Necropolis. With the amulet around my neck, its glow vibrant, and the key in my hand, I turned back towards the altar. The spectral figure within the mirror seemed to nod in approval. The mirror itself emitted a soft, ethereal light, illuminating the chapel's interior and revealing engravings and symbols previously concealed in the shadows. The room seemed to come alive with energy as I approached the altar once more. The engravings on the mirror's frame glowed, forming intricate patterns that intertwined with the amulet's radiance. It was a puzzle, a connection between the amulet, the mirror, and the hidden key. As I held the amulet towards the mirror, the light intensified, projecting an image onto the wall, the image of Malia Baden. I watched in awe as the image transformed, unveiling a sequence of symbols and shapes that appeared to be a key to unlocking the next step of my journey. The book's guidance echoed once more, directing me to decipher the pattern and unveil the path ahead. Many minutes passed as I meticulously studied the patterns, the symbols, and the amulet's glow. It was a dance of light and shadows, a puzzle demanding patience and insight. As the sun cast a warm glow through the chapel's windows, I finally deciphered the pattern. The sequence of symbols pointed towards a specific area of the chapel floor. With excitement and anticipation, I moved to the indicated spot and pressed down. A section of the floor gave way, revealing a hidden compartment below. Inside this compartment, I found a box that required a key to open. Using the key I had found earlier, I opened the box. Within lay a weathered leather-bound journal, the missing piece to this arcane mystery. I opened the journal, and as I began to read the entries within, a sense of sorrow and understanding washed over me. The journal belonged to the Abaddon family, chronicling their lives from the moment they first set foot in our town. Their anguish, pain, and longing were etched onto the pages, a testament to the curse they had brought upon themselves in this place. The journal detailed their lives and their connection to the Keeper of Souls. It contained incantations, rituals, and information about the Keeper's lair, knowledge that would be crucial for the final confrontation. Inside the journal was a sketch of a large tree, with the words "Lair of the Keeper" written beneath it. With the journal in hand and the amulet still glowing around my neck, I felt a profound connection to the Abaddon family's story. There was a connection bridging the gap between the past and the present, a link binding me to the fate of Necropolis and the souls it held captive. As I closed the journal, the spectral figure within the mirror seemed to smile in acknowledgement of the progress I had made. The mirror's glow gradually faded, and the chapel returned to its quiet, ancient ambience. The figure vanished into a mist within the reflection, and the engravings and symbols on the frame receded, leaving no trace of the solved puzzle. With the photograph, the journal, and the amulet as my guides, I knew my next steps were clear. The Keeper's lair awaited a confrontation demanding all of my newfound knowledge, strength, and determination. The shadows might conspire, and the curse might resist, but armed with the stories of the past, the power of the amulet, and the resolve to break the curse, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Leaving the chapel behind, I stepped once again onto the winding paths of Necropolis, each footstep carrying me closer to the heart of the cemetery. The sun's golden rays bathed the gravestones, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward me, as if urging me forward. The journey was far from over, but with the photograph and the journal, I was armed with the keys to unveil the Keeper's secrets and put an end to its reign of darkness. My resolve remained unshaken despite the growing intensity of the shadows coiling around me. The bald man's words echoed in my mind, shadows conspiring against me, and I knew the Keeper of Souls would not relinquish its dominion without a fierce battle. As I navigated the labyrinthine paths, following the symbols and guidance from the journal, I felt an undeniable connection to the Abaddon family's story. Their journal provided insights into the Keeper's vulnerabilities, its origins, and the rituals that had perpetuated its curse. I couldn't help but wonder if their spirits were guiding us in our shared quest for liberation. Perhaps their souls were looking for redemption, or maybe it was to free themselves only. Either way, their presence was felt. Finally, I stood before a massive, ancient oak tree located behind the chapel in Necropolis. Its gnarled branches stretched toward the sky like skeletal fingers, and its roots seemed to delve deep into the earth, binding it to the very heart of the cemetery. This was the place, the site of the Keeper's lair. With the amulet around my neck and the journal in hand, I approached the tree. The ground beneath me trembled, and the air grew heavy with a sense of anticipation. Shadows converged around the oak, coiling like serpents, as if they were a part of the Keeper itself. Whispers echoed all around me as I opened the journal to a specific page, revealing an incantation that held the key to summoning the Keeper. As I spoke the incantation, the air crackled with energy, and the earth itself seemed to respond. The ground shook, and the roots of the oak tree started to writhe and contort, as if reacting to an ancient memory. A maelstrom of shadows swirled around me, and the air grew colder with each passing moment. From the depths of the oak, a figure began to materialize, a grotesque, twisted form that exuded malevolence and suffering. The Keeper of Souls had awoken, its eyes burning with a fiery intensity that held centuries of torment. Its voice resonated within my mind, a cacophony of whispers and screams that threatened to overwhelm me. It spoke a language I couldn't understand, but its tone was undeniably enraged. Yet I held fast, my grip on the journal unyielding. The amulet's glow pulsed, pushing back against the keeper's darkness, while the journal's words provided a shield of understanding. The keeper's voice became a cacophony of rage and fear, and its form flickered, as if unable to fully manifest in the presence of the amulet's light. With each word I spoke from the journal, the keeper's screams grew louder, its form wavering like a mirage. I recited the rituals that the Abaddons had written in case things got out of control, each incantation weakening the keeper's grip on Necropolis. The ancient oak trembled, its roots writhing, as if trying to escape the curse that had entangled it for centuries. The entire cemetery began to shake, as if the souls it held were about to burst from their confines. The ground shook, the air became vibrant with emotion, and the whispers around me turned into shrieks of terror. Then, as the crescendo of incantations reached its climax, I held the photograph aloft, the image of Molly Abaddon's face radiating a warm light. The keeper's screams turned into desperate howls, and its form began to unravel, its shadowy tendrils recoiling as if repelled by the photograph's illumination. With a final, resounding incantation, the photograph ignited with a burst of fire. The flames danced, consuming the image and transforming it into a brilliant inferno that defied the darkness engulfing me. The keeper's form shuddered, its cries becoming shrill and agonized as the flames intensified. As the flames engulfed the image, the journal's pages began to glow with an otherworldly light. The words on the pages blurred, then transformed into tendrils of fire that encircled the keeper. The curse that had bound it for so long was unraveling, its malevolence fading as if consumed by the flames of the Abaddon family's memories. With a final, thunderous roar, the Keeper of Souls disintegrated into a burst of smoke and ash, its presence vanquished by the strength of the amulet, the power of the incantations, and the sacrifice of Molly's image. The ground shook one last time, and then, blindness settled over me as I felt the air growing colder, and screams began echoing in my mind. I felt as if I were on fire. I began to scream, but I couldn't hear my own voice over the screams of many souls echoing in my mind. Suddenly, everything stopped. I can't remember what happened, but eventually, I found myself lying in an empty field of grass. I felt a throbbing pain in my head and was overcome with fatigue. I got up to examine my surroundings. The terrain was the same one Necropolis once stood on, but it was now devoid of everything apart from grass, flowers, rocks, and a few trees. The amulet and all the other objects I had obtained from Necropolis were no longer with me. Nothing but the memories of Necropolis remained. It was all over now. Had I freed the souls from their torment? There was no way for me to be sure, but after all that I had gone through, I hoped that I had. Several weeks had passed since these events, and my life had taken a turn for the better. I had made new friends and found a job that paid well, not as generously as the money Mr. Damien had promised, but at least this time, the rules I was given made no mention of malevolent creatures.